There's a cruel truth, one that most people don't want to face after the age of 70. That is, your body is quietly writing the date of its own ending, not through a loud announcement, not through a doctor's diagnosis, but through the smallest of signs appearing while you sleep, when you step out of bed, or when you find yourself staring silently into the mirror. I used to think old means weak, old means forgetful, old means lonely. But then I realized that's not true for everyone. I have a friend, his name is Howard, 88 years old, still cycling every morning, still playing chess, still laughing heartily every Saturday afternoon. And I have a brother-in-law, only 72, who's been bedridden for 3 years after a fall. Just 16 years apart, but they seem to live in two completely different worlds. Why is that? Because there are silent signs. If you notice them, you can extend your life. But if you ignore them, you may be walking closer toward your final journey without even knowing it. Today, I want to tell you about 7 strange warning signs that science has proven they can predict quite accurately how long you'll live after the age of 70. Not to scare you, but to help you change in time. Because sometimes knowing just one early sign might give you a whole lifetime more. Are you ready? I had an old friend named Mark. We worked together in a wood shop for nearly 30 years. Mark was always cheerful, witty. He loved telling the same old jokes so many times. I could recite all the punchlines by heart. But by the time he turned 74, something had changed. He stopped going to the coffee shop. He no longer called to invite me fishing on the weekends like he used to. Sometimes when I called, he'd give a short, distant answer, then go silent. When we met on the street, he'd smile, but the smile felt empty, like it had lost its soul. At first, I thought maybe it was family troubles, but a few months later, he was hospitalized for pneumonia, and then he never came home again. The doctors said his physical condition had deteriorated rapidly. But what I couldn't stop thinking about was that shift in his spirit before the illness, a kind of slow, quiet withdrawal from life. Much later, I read a major study from the National Institute of Health. They followed thousands of elderly individuals and found something astonishing. Losing interest in life, even just gradually giving up small daily habits, is one of the earliest indicators of premature death, increasing the risk by 30 to 40%. Not because they were physically ill, but because their spirit had already begun to fade. When you no longer feel like walking around the park, when you stop listening to the old songs you once loved, when you don't bother calling your grandchild because you think they're probably too busy anyway. That's not just getting old. That might be your inner self quietly warning you. I remember Mark, and I made a promise to myself, every single day, even if it's just one small thing, I'll give my soul something to look forward to. Maybe it's a warm cup of tea in the afternoon. Maybe it's planting a rose bush. Maybe it's just sitting on the porch, listening to the passing cars, and smiling because I can still feel the world flowing by. Because now I understand. When your spirit is still alive, your body is more willing to keep going. Sign number 2, losing balance. One time, my wife and I went to the supermarket. I just planned to grab a few cartons of milk, some bread, and head home. But when we walked into the frozen food section, where the cold air blasted down from above, I suddenly felt a chill run through my body, and strangely, my hands started to tremble. My wife noticed and quickly led me outside. I wasn't in pain. I didn't feel dizzy. But walking felt harder than usual. It was as if my legs stopped listening, swaying like a tiny boat on rough waves. I thought maybe it was just the cold air, but it didn't stop there. Later on, every time I stood up from the sofa, I had to pause for a few seconds before I could take a step. Sometimes while doing the dishes, I'd feel myself leaning slightly to one side. I went to the doctor. He gave me a simple test. Close your eyes and stand on one leg. Not even 5 seconds, and I lost balance. He said, declining balance is one of the earliest signs of nervous system and muscle aging. I stood there in shock. Then he added, for people over 70, poor balance is a major predictor of early death because it leads to falls, injuries, and loss of independence. So I started training. Each morning I'd stand on one leg while brushing my teeth. Then I'd walk in a straight line through the house, as if balancing on a tightrope. Sometimes I'd carry a glass of water while walking to train my center of gravity. In just 3 weeks, I noticed a difference. No more stumbling when getting out of bed. I felt like I was regaining control because now I understand. Staying balanced means staying in charge of your life. If you've started to feel unsteady, don't wait until you need a cane. Sign number 3, weakness in the hips and thighs. Another morning I was out in the garden watering plants. The sky was clear, the breeze was cool, but when I bent down to pick up a fallen leaf, I heard a crack in my back. It didn't hurt, but a dull ache lingered for the rest of the day. I brushed it off. But in the weeks that followed, I noticed myself growing weaker, especially in my hips and thighs. I tried stepping up a stair and had to hold the railing. I never used to. I carried 2 grocery bags from the car, and my legs shook like I just climbed a mountain. Then I realized I couldn't get up from a chair without using my hands. Not because it hurt, but because I simply didn't have the strength. I told the doctor. He smiled gently and asked me to try something. Stand up from this chair without using your hands. I fumbled. I shook my head. He said, this is the simplest test of muscle strength, especially the thigh muscles. And weak thighs are a strong predictor of death within 3 to 5 years in seniors. I was stunned. I never imagined that something so simple, standing up without your hands, could reveal so much. After that day, I started training. 10 sit-to-stands every day without using my arms. I lifted my legs while watching TV. I walked, slowly but steadily. No gym needed, no fancy equipment, just the understanding that as long as your legs can lift you up, you're still in charge of your life. Sign number 4, slowed thinking or speech. One evening, I was having dinner with my granddaughter. She's in college and only visits once in a while. She was chatting about school, her friends, even a bit about her love life. I just sat and listened, smiling, nodding. Then she asked me, Grandpa, what do you think I should do with my future? I paused. I wanted to say something meaningful, but it took me a few seconds to gather my words. She hesitated, then changed the subject. After dinner, I lay in bed for a long time. I wasn't sad that she didn't press the question. I was sad that I felt slow. I used to be sharp, quick with words, memories, comebacks. Now sometimes I'd stand in front of the fridge, open the door, and forget what I was looking for. I used to think that was just part of aging. But then I read about it. Slowed reaction time, declining memory, and broken sentences. These are the first 3 signs of mild cognitive impairment, which can lead to dementia if ignored. Science calls it MCI, mild cognitive impairment. To me, it's a quiet fear that every elder carries. Not the fear of forgetting, but the fear of no longer being yourself. So I started doing small things, reading the newspaper every morning, solving crosswords, listening to old songs and trying to recall the names of the singers, telling stories to my wife, even if she's heard them a dozen times, just to keep my brain moving. And I realized memory is like a flashlight. If you don't turn it on often, it fades. The more I kept myself thinking, connecting, remembering, the more I felt my mind returning. Not as sharp as before, but not lost. Don't be afraid of slowing down. Just don't give up. Sign number 5, reduced movement or physical activity. One morning I went to the market early, just planning to buy some fish and a few carrots. I carried the bags home, but halfway down the street, I felt my heart racing. It wasn't painful, but my breath shortened. I had to stop, lean against a wall, and wait a few minutes before walking again. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but when I got home, I checked my watch. I had walked far fewer steps than usual that day. And then I realized each week I was moving less and less. I no longer took evening walks in the park. I didn't feel excited to visit the bookstore like before. I did not want to go anywhere unless I absolutely had to. I wasn't tired. I just didn't feel like walking anymore. I told this to my regular doctor, and he said something I'll never forget. The closer someone is to death, the less they move. It sounded cold, but it was true. According to research, the level of daily movement, especially step count, is closely linked to life expectancy. Seniors over 70 who consistently walk fewer than 2,000 steps per day face nearly double the risk of early death. That hit me hard, not because of the number, but because I had so easily abandoned my own footsteps. So I started again. At first, I walked small circles around the house. Then I walked to the mailbox, picked vegetables from the garden, stood while talking on the phone, added just a little bit more each day. Now, I don't set high goals. I just remind myself, as long as I can still walk, I will walk. Because when my feet still move, my heart still beats, my brain still gets oxygen, and I am still alive. Sign number 6, long-term sleep trouble. I used to suffer from relentless insomnia. There were nights when I stared at the ceiling for 3 hours straight, eyes wide open. I tossed left, flipped right, turned the light on, turned it off. But sleep was like a locked door that wouldn't open. I tried herbal teas, relaxing music, even counted breaths like the meditation video said, but nothing worked. The next morning I felt drained, my head foggy, limbs sluggish. Even standing made me feel woozy. One day I almost collapsed. My mind felt like it was wrapped in cotton. I told the doctor, and he asked me, "Do you know that chronic insomnia after age 70 doesn't just make you tired, it can actually shorten your life?" I was shocked. He said, according to multiple studies, seniors who sleep poorly, getting less than 5 hours a night, or experiencing fragmented sleep, have a 45% higher risk of early death than those with consistent rest. Why? Because during sleep, your body heals itself. Your heart stabilizes. Your brain clears out toxins. Your immune system regenerates. Without sleep, your body loses its chance to repair. So I got serious. I turned off the TV at least an hour before bedtime. I drank a warm glass of milk, used soft amber lighting, and most importantly, I let go of thoughts I couldn't control. I practiced steady breathing, gratitude, and slowly, I slept. Not every night was perfect, but I finally understood. Sleep isn't just rest. It's a vital part of staying alive in old age. If you're not sleeping well, take a deeper look. Sometimes it's not a pill you're missing. It's a mind that hasn't been allowed to let go. Sign number 7, emotional disconnection and loneliness. I have a friend, Mrs. Eleanor, 80 years old. I call her my sunbeam on wheels. Wherever she goes, she brings smiles, warmth, and an energy that draws people in. She often visits my house, bringing baked goods, sharing local stories. But most of all, she always asks about others. She remembers the names of all my grandchildren. She notices the smallest changes in the neighbors. She knows who's happy, who's sad, who's sick, who's better. I once asked her, "Why do you keep track of all that? Isn't it tiring?" She smiled and said, "I live alone. If I don't stay connected, I'll disappear and no one will notice." That hit me in the heart. She was right. Loneliness isn't just being physically alone. It's the feeling that you no longer matter to anyone. And science confirms it. Seniors over 70 who experience chronic loneliness have the same risk of early death as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It corrodes the heart, weakens the immune system, slows the brain, and over time you fade away into silence, unseen. So I made a change. I called an old friend, wrote a handwritten letter, opened the window and greeted my neighbor, checked in with the shopkeeper I see every week. Each time I felt like I still belonged, because now I know we don't live longer by counting heartbeats. We live longer by having something in our hearts worth beating for. Dear friend, after 70, many people talk more about death, but I don't. I want to talk about the life that remains, whether that's a year, a month, or just this very day. Because you know what? As long as you can still wake up in the morning, still hear the birds on the porch, still feel the sunlight through the window, then you still have a wonderful reason to live. I know, sometimes you may feel left behind. Friends pass away, your children are busy. Your face in the mirror changes day by day, and you ask yourself, do I even matter anymore? But you are not meaningless. You are the living memory of an entire generation. You are the one who once held your crying child through the night. You are the one who skipped breakfast to pay for your grandchild's education. You have loved, lost, forgiven, endured. You have walked through storms and come out the other side. And today, just by sitting here reading these words, you are passing on something so precious. Life, love, hope. Never think of yourself as just a shadow in the corner of the house. You are a gentle light that others still need, even if they don't say it. So, eat the meal you love. Call the friend you miss. Wear the outfit that makes you feel beautiful. And if you can forgive someone, even if that someone is yourself, because you deserve peace, you deserve to live fully. Until the very last moment, with all the love you once gave, now given back to you.